Welcome to the Organic Wine Podcast. Hello, this is Adam Huss coming to you from Los Angeles, California. Thanks so much for listening. And welcome to Season 3 of the Organic Wine Podcast. Wow. I get so many benefits out of doing this podcast, not the least of which is the joy of getting to have thoughtful conversations with brilliant people who can inspire and teach all of us. In fact, doing this podcast has highlighted for me just how rare it is in the rest of life to sit down with someone and have a meeting of the minds, to ask them about their life, their perspectives, and their areas of expertise, and to give them the time and attention to let them be thorough in answering my questions. Listening to people, giving them the respect of your attention, attempting to see the world through their eyes, this to me is the soul of compassion and may be a revolutionary act. At the very least, I guarantee that it has the potential to revolutionize your own heart and mind. The goal I have for this podcast is to give you hope. That may sound strange for a wine podcast, but I guess this is not a normal wine podcast. I want each episode to be an example, despite whatever may be going on in the world, of folks who are doing beautiful work with wine. I'm extremely grateful to all the incredible people who have given of their time and expertise to be part of this podcast, not only for what I've learned, but also because they've given me an example of something that does not originate from a place of ignorance, greed, or selfishness. That kind of work is brave, it's difficult, it's inspiring, and it's vitally important. I want to honor that, and I want all of us who care about this kind of work to know that we're not alone in it. So don't stop doing it. Don't stop caring. And thank you. My guest for this episode is Martin Bernal-Hafner. Martin is doing some beautiful and hard work in Mendocino County for Alta Orsa on a vineyard that was probably planted by someone who was the love child of Michelangelo and a sadist. If that analogy doesn't make sense, what I'm trying to say is that this vineyard looks like the Sistine Chapel, but farming it could be a form of torture. Martin may be the perfect guy for such a difficult job. He's humble and unassuming, thorough and careful, with kindness and patience to boot. And maybe that's why you haven't heard of him or Alta Orsa. But that, and the kind of farming he's doing, despite herculean challenges, are exactly why I wanted to talk to him for the podcast. But even more than that, the Alta Orsa estate vineyard is something special. Halfway up a mountain, at the end of what looks and drives like a dirt fire service road, you come upon what could be an old Italian villa if it was set in Middle Earth. When the gate opens and you pass through the weathered stone entry, it's like going through a fairy door into another realm. Vineyard rows that have never been tilled in 30 years twist and turn over to the steep contours of the mountainside, so closely planted that they must be tended entirely by hand, and the wine that flows from them is dusky, rich, and complex. I'm not saying Martin has pointy ears, but there is something magical about this place that I hope you get to taste. And if you get a chance to visit, don't be surprised if you think you see something twinkling out of the corner of your eye that disappears into the shadows when you turn to look. Enjoy. Thank you, Martin. Thank you for joining me. Welcome.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Hey, so can you tell me where you are right now and what you're doing?
Absolutely. Yeah. So as I mentioned before, school's out, so I had to take care of my daughter today. So today I'm at my wife's work, which is actually her family's winery here in Alexander Valley. So I'm at Hafner Vineyard because my daughter's sleeping with grandparents while I do this interview.
Oh, fantastic. Nice. Are you in, it sounds a little like you might be in a winery space. Are you?
Exactly. Yeah. You might hear some clinking of bottles because they're labeling and repacking some wine downstairs. So I'm in her dad, Park Hafner. He's the winemaker. I'm in his office right now and they're doing all the work downstairs.
Well, nice. But that's not where you normally work. Where do you normally work? What's your job?
This is not my daily task to sit here. No, I work at Alta Orsa, so our winery up in Hopland. So many of you probably don't know. Hopland's in southern Mendocino County, almost right at the border with Sonoma County. So it's kind of the southernmost area or town in Mendocino County. It's right along 101, about 2 hours north of San Francisco.
Sort of like right where the 101 becomes like a street instead of a highway, basically.
Exactly. In Hopland is a 1-lane road.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. Like once you once the 101 stops being the 101, you've arrived.
exactly. When you go 35 miles an hour on
Right.
101.
um, yeah, it sounds like it should be more of a place for beer with a name like Hopland.
Well,
But
yeah, this whole area, there's a lot of hops back in the
are there
day.
still? Oh, back in
There's
the
still
day. Okay.
some back in the day. That's where it got its name.
That's awesome. It's also so like Hippieville, right? I mean, if I'm gonna use the vernacular, I mean
Yes,
it's sort of
definitely
like
some of that. I mean, it's part of the Green Triangle, so
right.
Mendocino, Humboldt, and
Okay,
Trinity. So there's
got it.
definitely a lot of cannabis growing, especially nowadays. But it's also great for grape growing. The wine scene is fairly big, also in the area.
Yeah, I mean, what I meant by that was yes, the green triangle, but also I think the values of environmental values, caring about the land, caring about the earth, conservation, things like that. The
Oh,
and I mean because you arrive in Hopland and you start seeing organic vineyard signs everywhere. I mean Bonterra is there, but
yeah,
there's lots of other
Fetzer.
places. Yeah, yeah, and you're surrounded by or you're next door to Terrasavia,
Savia,
is that
exactly.
right?
And Campavita, I think they do biodynamics. So
Right.
absolutely, I think Mendocino has become sort of a hub for organic, winemaking and grape growing. So yeah, there's a ton of different vineyards that are. That's how they started, and they're pioneers in that area from a long time ago. I
Yeah.
think starting 70s or 80s.
Yeah.
The Dolans, and so yeah, it's a great area to be in. And I guess also the Topels, which was the prior iteration of Alta Orsa, they've been farming since the late 80s. Our property itself, not very well known because we're so small, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
it's a
and go ahead, sorry.
Oh no, yeah. I was going to say it's a sort of a magical place that not many people have heard of, Mendocino County. But yeah, it's a great resource if you want to look into organic wineries and
I
many
couldn't
organic agriculture. Really, there's a ton of cool projects happening.
Yeah, I couldn't believe actually how just beautiful the landscape is there in general. I mean, just driving around, it's like this steep, windy mountain roads, but it feels like you're in classical California, savanna style with like big open hillsides dotted with oak trees, but the hillsides are just extreme, and then
Yeah,
you get and then you get, there's all these gorges and it's just it's stunning. I mean, it's
yeah.
really just like a beautiful, beautiful landscape.
I know.
I
It
mean,
never gets old. Trust me. I
ugh.
drive it every day, and the views from the winery. It never quite gets old. It's pretty. It's a really magical place.
Well, so before we get into Alta Orsa, formerly Topel, can you talk a little bit about how your path led you there? Like, where did you come from? What was your training and experience that brought you there?
Yeah, so my journey through wine, it started, as many of us in the industry, as a second career. So I was not trained in winemaking. I was more on the business side. I went to Boston College, and there I met my wife. So my interest in wine started there. It was at first not direct. Did join a little tasting club at Boston College, but it was nothing too serious. Then we left when we graduated, went to New York and worked there for 2 years. And we didn't quite connect necessarily. We didn't see ourselves continuing our careers at the times. And she thought maybe going back to the family business, but first, doing it outside the family business. So she wanted to at least do a harvest. So we both went to France to do our first harvest. And, she was fortunate. We were fortunate enough that her family's hosted French interns for the last 30 plus years from
Yeah.
a university called Pierpont. And
Okay.
so many of the interns are now winemakers, are in agriculture. And so there's a lot of great connections that we had. And Guillaume, which I believe he was the intern in 1995, was the director of winemaking at Chapoutier. So we,
Oh.
yeah, he was one of the, he really had a special time here in California. So he always felt like he owed something to Park and the Hafner family. And so he hosted us. We lived with his family like he did in 1995, I think, when Kate was about the same age as his daughters were at the time.
Wow. Wow.
So yeah, it was a great opportunity for us because usually it can be difficult to do an internship in France coming from the U.S. But he really opened up the doors for us to explore this wine world, which I didn't know. When looking back at that first harvest, I didn't really know much about even fermentation. When people talk about wine aging in barrel for 2 years, I thought fermentation may take 2 years.
Right. Right.
It's one of those
Yeah.
that I was pretty ignorant about the whole process, to be honest.
You probably still get that question. I get that question all the time. Like, how many years does it take to ferment wine? Or
Exactly.
some version of that, you know?
Exactly. And when I tell people, Pinot Noir, it goes from grapes to wine in 2 weeks, and people are like, "What? Are you kidding me?" It's like, no, it happens. You get wine that fast. It's just the aging process. It's a different thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really quite an exciting experience for us, learning from zero, how to operate pumps, managing fermentations, the language itself. But it was such an
Yeah.
incredible experience from a cultural and community perspective. I love the wine culture in general. It's very international. So we had other interns or stagiaires from, of course, there were some French ones, but there were people from South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, and really all over the world. And that kind of worldly community really attracted me. It kind of spoke to a lot of the values that I wanted to have in a career.
Why was that?
Well, so I grew up originally in Colombia, so I always felt a little bit kind of part of the international community. And I always
Yeah.
thought, oh, I'm going to use my first language, now living in the US as part of my career. And I wanted to have kind of international exposure because I always felt like comfortable around international people, and kind of yearned for that multicultural interaction. But, in my business world, my career, I didn't really get to use it very much.
Mm.
So that was something that really spoke to me, but also the agricultural side. So that's something that I've always really enjoyed as well. So it was a
Why,
confluence. The
if I can
agricultural
ask?
part,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I would probably have to go back to my grandfather. I spent a lot of time growing up with my grandparents, and he was a retired Air Force pilot, but he loved gardening. They had big properties with a lot of kind of fruit trees, so he was always very much in his retirement into agriculture. And so just spending a lot of time with him, it just really spoke to me. I loved that was, what I loved doing when I was growing up
Mm.
as a little kid. On the weekends, we would go off to our little property outside of Bogota and plant fruit trees and take care of them. So that was always kind of in my heart. Granted, I lived in cities for most of my life.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that part. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. No, I love that. That sounds, maybe the living in the city helps make it, absence makes the heart grow fonder, so to speak.
Absolutely.
For the agriculture in some cases, as long as you have some exposure to it. If none, you don't even know what you're missing, basically. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, I mean, I love that. I mean, that's part of why what I'm trying to do is sort of bring the agriculture to an urban center so that, people can get that exposure. I love that.
Exposure. Yeah, no, you definitely need that exposure for everyone. I was listening to your most recent podcast, and you mentioned, or your guest mentioned, as a service. What was it?
Yes.
Not military service, but a kind of a
Yeah.
requirement.
Yeah.
And I
Like a
was like,
public.
yeah, public service, and almost like the Peace Corps, but for agriculture. Something along those
Yes.
lines. I was like, that would be genius because most people have no idea where their food comes from, what it takes to grow it. And the real cost, we're used to such cheap food,
Right.
and that has its consequences.
Yeah.
And we don't, we think of fruit
We're
being
used
really
to,
expensive, or going to a farmer's market and be like, oh my god, this is so expensive. But at the end of the day, these farmers aren't really making any money. It's just, the food's supposed to be expensive.
yeah. Yeah. We're used to cheap food, and we're getting what we're paying for,
Yeah,
basically.
exactly.
Um, well, so and when did the job at where you currently are arrive in your life?
Oh yeah, sorry, I got distracted.
Sorry, that's all right. That's memory lane.
Yeah, so memory lane. So basically, when we went to France, I really fell in love with the manual labor, or the culture, the
Mm,
community around it, and then we continued traveling around Europe. We did an olive harvest in Italy. We had some friends that had a little operation. So we harvested olives for 3 days, made some olive oil, and then after that, they recommended that we go to Argentina. They thought the Argentinian wine scene was interesting, so we reached out to some contacts there through them, and so ended up at Viña Cobos in Mendoza. So we basically went down for the southern hemisphere harvest, and just further, fell in love with the wine scene. It's completely different. Europe, and of course, like Chapoutier was a little bit more grounded in tradition. They've been around for a long time, and it was kind of nice to see it in from a different perspective, a little bit more New World winemaking, more modern facilities. Even though, I mean, Chapoutier, has incredible facilities, but they're so grounded on tradition. But in Jacobos,
right.
you know, they were making some amazing Malbecs, some great Chardonnays. It was just a different kind of mentality, but both, were incredible experiences that really closed the deal on me on changing my career. So, and then I connected with, so Viña Cobos is owned by Paul Hobbs, who's their American winemaker.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Yeah.
Exactly. So he really cut his teeth, I would say, almost in Argentina, helping Catena set up, uh,
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
his operate. Well, not setting it up, but so he worked a lot with Catena in improving, I believe, the quality of his production down there.
Got it. Like doing upgrades and basically.
Upgrades and some consulting. I don't know the exact extent, but so Paul is very well known in Argentina.
Huh.
And
Okay.
yeah, so he made definitely a name for himself there, and he basically spends half the year in Argentina and half the year in the U.S., or around his projects around the world.
Got it.
And he was really an inspiring figure for me in the sense that he's a very vineyard focused guy. So in the
Yeah.
cellar, we only see him during harvest, kind of at the end of the day after he's visited all the vineyards, and managed everything. He'll taste through all the fermentations, but he was really focused on the vineyards, and that was sort of one of the impressive parts of Argentina. And the fun thing about going in early is because the first part we did spend a few days going out to the vineyards, seeing the different viticultural practices, irrigation, and different things that they did. So that was great exposure. Coming from a biodynamic hillside farmed, wine region, which is kind of like our meat and those Rhone hills, to
Yeah.
desert farming, right on the other side of the Andes, where they do flood irrigation because they have enormous amounts of water that come from the Andes. So it was pretty wild. It was a really fun
Wild. Yeah.
experience.
That's incredible. Yeah. So you came back with a fire in your belly for changing your career. Did you just drop out of what you? I mean, I guess you'd already dropped out if you'd spent a year abroad doing these various stages.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah. So I think once in France, I decided I was not gonna go back into business. It wasn't a bad gig being, in the finance world, but it didn't. I couldn't see myself doing it in the future. I worked with some great people, learned a lot of great things, but it wasn't a career for me. It didn't really speak to what I wanted to do with my life. So coming back, I knew I was not going to go back into finance. So I fortunately connected with Paul in Argentina. And when I came back, I was asked, if I could continue here in his Sebastopol operation. So I first started at Crossbarn, which is,
Oh yeah, yeah,
it's his more affordable tier of wines and also
yep.
custom crush facility. So that was a really exciting place to be for a number of reasons. So, I started in the cellar, but also I was able to get into the lab, learn a ton kind of on the chemistry side, but also in the cellar practices. And working with custom crush clients, I also got to see, work with a lot of different winemakers that were inspiration in many different ways. So I worked
Probably a
with
lot of different types of wine as well, different winemaking styles
yeah, a lot
and
of different
varieties of
styles,
grapes.
approaches to winemaking, different regions. So that was really exciting for me. It was a great exposure. So yeah, and it was a great place to start. And then after about, I believe, think it was 3 years at Crossbarn, I moved on to Paul Hobbs, which, I had a lot of interactions going back and forth between both the whole time. But basically, I took over kind of the enology department at one point and managed all the analysis for basically both, for the whole company.
Wow.
For Paul
Yeah.
Hobbs and for Crossbarn.
Wow. That's a great experience.
Yeah, no, it was really exciting. But honestly, the fun part was just being exposed to so many different wines and winemaking styles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm assuming somewhere along the way you wanted to graduate to being your own winemaker and put into practice all of the things that you'd been absorbing with your own ideas, and here you are. Is
Exactly.
that
So yeah, no. So
did I?
as many of us in the wine industry, I think we all kind of dream about making our own wine. Being at Paul Hobbs is a great experience from this, in the sense that I learned to make great wines, but I was also just in production. So being as it wasn't a huge winery, we were making, I think, maybe total about 50 to 70,000 cases during my time there. But I was just, involved with production. I saw very little of the vineyard. I probably saw it more as an intern of vineyards. So I really was itching to kind of get out into the vineyard, learn that aspect of of the business, and also sales. When we put the wine in the truck after bottling it, I had no idea who drank our wine, so I didn't have any interactions with any of our customers. So it was this huge disconnect on the grape growing and on the consumer side that was made it hard for me to understand the true implications of what we were doing.
Okay.
And this opportunity just arose at so
What?
basically, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, no. What was the opportunity? I mean, what sold you on saying yes to where you currently are?
So yeah, basically, it was a connection through a mutual friend, and Roger, who is kind of the primary owner partner in Orsa and Alta Orsa, had just purchased Topel Winery. So the Topel family had ran this operation for many many years, but they Mark, who was the winemaker, had some health issues and they wanted to move on, basically kind of retire. Their children, their kids did not want to be involved in the business. So Roger was really looking for a partner to run the operation. When I, heard about the possibility, I was intrigued. I didn't feel like, well, I didn't really know until I visited. I saw this property, kind of heard a little bit of the history, tasted some of the wines, and it was just it seemed like an amazing opportunity to do something on my own. It was the size, exactly the size that I wanted to start with. So we were making under 1,000 cases, um, organically farmed vineyard, where I would have my hands in the grape growing, the winemaking, and the sales. So that was kind of Roger's proposal to kind of enter into this partnership where I would be doing it all.
That sounds like a
Because
great partner.
yeah, he was not, he loves wine, but he didn't have the experience in any of those fields. So that's
Got it.
kind of where I came in. And it was, yeah, I knew it was going to be incredibly challenging. It's going to be quite a journey, but I was ready for it after being, working in the industry for nearly 8 years and at Paul Hobbs for 8 years, for 7 years. I was ready
Wow.
for something new, where
No, it
I
sounds
wanted to,
incredible.
yeah, just tackle on a new challenge.
Yeah, it sounds like an incredible opportunity. And I mean, did you have the experience that I had seeing the place for the first time? And did you have any? I mean, what was that like when you showed up for the first time? I mean, I imagine you might be a little more jaded than me in terms of seeing beautiful vineyards, but was there? What was your impression when you first showed up?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I remember, yeah, it was a rainy winter day. A little
Nice.
bit like today, actually. But
Yeah.
no, I mean, like I said, that property never gets old, and it is magical, even, years after being there. So it was just kind of stunning driving up the road. I think I was shocked by the dirt road at first, and I wasn't quite sure if I was going to the right place.
Right.
But after those 2 miles of dirt road, getting to the gate, I was like, okay, I survived the road. Now this is the reward. It was amazing. There are a lot of challenges that I saw right away from the kind of on the infrastructure side, on the vineyard side, the way the vineyard's planted. So it was a little bit scary just seeing the challenges that were lay ahead. But at the same time, that's kind of what I was looking for. Is something where it wasn't completely set up, and I could have an influence over the future of this, really special vineyard.
Yeah, it is really special. And I should have started by or somewhere near the beginning, given some disclosure to say, I know about this vineyard because it's the source of one of our wines that we we put we put out through Centralis, and I mean, the vineyard was a big reason for that, and the farming that you do is the main reason for that. I mean, it's the reason it opened the door to us trying your wines and realizing there was so much potential and so much deliciousness there. So when I came up to visit, it was like that 2 mile road is just like you're taking a journey like time, out of space and time in a way. Like I came during the fires of 2019. Was it 20? Yeah. Wait, I think it was. Yeah. And I mean, the air was full of smoke, and somehow that place made it even seem sort of sexy and beautiful and mystical with the smoke hanging in the air and like the red sun blotted out
Exactly.
blotted out in the sky. I mean, just like it's all it's gorgeous as you wind up through, and you arrive after 2 miles of just like the sort of rutted out dirt road winding up through up the mountainside. And it is a place that I often describe it as like the person who created that place must have not known anything about farming grapes, because they would have made it so much easier on themselves if they had done it differently. But that's part of its. I mean, I imagine when you showed up, you were looking at it with those kind of eyes of like, oh my god, the work involved here. But when I showed up, it was like, well, somebody else has to do the work. This is just stunningly gorgeous. Like I get to appreciate the raw beauty of it and the
Yeah,
magic of it.
it is
There's like,
exactly. I mean, there was that surprise of being like, "Oh, this is actually hand farmed." There is that kind of realization. I was like, "Ooh, I don't know how they've done this for 30 years, but someone's done it, so it's possible."
yeah. So, and well, let's talk about what are the some of the interesting things about it. I remember. Well, I'll just say like one of the first things I wanted to do was walk into the vineyard, because you walk in and the vines are so close to you that like I could reach out my arms and they extended beyond the rows because they're planted that narrowly. They're like the vineyard rows are like it's like a 3x4 spacing. Is that right? Something like that. Like the close.
So it's
I mean, it's
around 3.5 by 5.
okay. All right.
Yeah, so block three, which is the one right by the winery, yeah, I think it's supposed to be 4.5 by 5, but I've measured it many times,
You're like
um,
they got it.
because I'm trying to think, okay, what can I fit through this row? Uh,
Nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that
So
was one of the
you guys don't
first.
have it. Sorry. Go ahead. Go
No,
ahead.
no,
You
no.
don't.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you guys don't have a tractor, right? This is
We
like,
don't have a tractor, yeah. So we
and
basically barely use any machinery. So we don't have an in-house tractor. We do borrow a tractor exclusively during harvest to basically haul the grapes from sort of the roads, vineyard roads to the winery. So that's the only
this
time the
is
vineyard sees any big machinery.
right, and it's about 20 acres. Is that right?
Well, so 20 acres is sort of the fenced in area.
Got it.
The
Okay,
actual vineyard
would be less.
layout, I would say about 12, and we're currently
Okay.
farming about 10.
Got it. And this is essentially mountainside vineyard. So it's and the rows sort of follow these contours, and it's not one aspect. I mean, there's a lot of different aspects throughout the vineyard, right?
Exactly. So,
I
kind of
mean,
going back to Hopland. So you arrive at Hopland and you take
yeah.
Duncan Springs Road. This tiny little dirt road, and you climb about 1,000 feet. The lowest elevation in our vineyard, I believe, is around 1,100 feet, and sort of the top side is around 1,400 feet of elevation. So, in those, let's say, 10 acres that we have planted, 12 acres that we have planted, you find different soil types, different exposures, different grades. So it's an incredibly diverse vineyard in that sense. And because of that, there's microclimates, there's different growth patterns.
Mhm.
It's like farming 10 different vineyards at the end of the day.
Right, right, right. Oh, that sounds like a joy.
It is.
But also, I mean, the other thing, I mean, literally the mountain, the forest begins where the vineyard ends. I mean, just
Hmm.
outside the fence, and some inside the fence, and goes right up to the top of what is it, Duarte Peak?
Duncan Peak.
Duncan Peak. Sorry,
Exactly.
it started with a D, and there was a U in there. Um, and it's pretty wild. It's a pretty wild and woolly place, and you have the incredible views. I mean, it's like sweeping. It's like, I don't know if you've ever been to Montebello in Santa Cruz, but it's sort of like being at Montebello and looking over Silicon Valley. That's the kind of views that you get from up there. Except it's not. You don't see Apple. You see Hopland.
You see how,
uh,
yeah, exactly. No, yeah, the
um,
views are absolutely amazing. We are almost the last strawberry on Duncan Springs Road, and yeah, like you said, it's a pretty wild place. There's really nothing around us except forests. The steep slopes have kept it pretty much undeveloped, aside from a few residences, and there is actually another vineyard right behind us. But that's about it up on the mountain. It's really sort of a pristine landscape. So we have around 160 acres that encompass the property at the end of the day.
oh wow, yeah.
So we
And
go halfway up Duncan Peak, and there's some magical places down there. So I don't think we had the chance to take you to the springs that are along sort of the canyon
oh
there. There's a lot of
no,
natural springs.
I did hike up to almost the top of Duncan Peak, just through the woods, and found all kinds of. I mean, it's gorgeous. I can just spend whatever you know. I
Yeah.
would prefer to get. I try to get lost, honestly, when I go hiking in the woods. Be like, just so I have an excuse to stay out and not come back. But it was incredible. I mean, it was like, yeah. I mean, and just some of the wildlife that you see. I remember, I've been in California for a while, and I've seen many a covey of quail, and you're used to, like, you see the mama quail run, and then, or like the lead quail, and then there's like a dozen quail run across, so you sort of wait. And I remember seeing like the first quail sort of run out from like a little brush area around like the reservoir area,
Yeah.
right above the vineyard. And I was like, okay, there's like a dozen, and then they're still coming, and they're still coming, they're still coming, and I was like trying to count. I lost count around 50, just
Yeah.
like an enormous amount of quail, just like a constant stream. It was like comical at a certain point. And then
No,
you guys
yeah.
have like deer living in the vineyard. You pretty much gave over your Merlot block that year to feed a couple deer that had decided
Yeah,
they liked it a lot there.
exactly. Yeah, we have all kinds of wildlife, but yeah, deer have been sort of our biggest issue. So yeah, the Merlot for 2020 and 2021, I believe they ate at least 90% of our Merlot, which is incredibly frustrating, and about half of our Syrah, which is a real shame there because I love our Syrah and I wish I had more of
Oh,
it, but
yeah, your Syrah's great.
yeah, ruminants are really hungry, So that's for some reason they do prefer grape, Merlot leaves and fruit.
Oh,
So they've
oh,
become quite a pest, honestly, unfortunately, because they've damaged even vines, broken a number of canes, and almost killed some vines just from their hungry eating habit. So we've this year we did a big push with the deer fencing. We have a fence all around, but the top wires were not on for
oh,
a big section of it.
gotcha.
So yeah, hopefully that's going to take care of it. A gentle approach is just to make him 8 foot fences.
Right, right. Yeah. Clearly, they haven't seen Sideways, or they might not be as interested in your Merlot. Um,
I do love the Merlot though for my red Bordeaux blend for the hillside. So that's going to take a
yes.
toll.
um, it's funny. You might know this. You've seen Sideways, I take it, right?
Yes, a while ago.
It's so like one of the ironies of that, where literally like a year after that movie came out, I think Merlot's sales tanked like 40% in America, basically, and I mean it was this huge repercussion. I mean, like whole vineyards were ripped out because of and whole many more vineyards of Pinot were planted, and the funny thing is, like in that movie, the character disparages Merlot, obviously, and disparages Cab Franc, and then that his Cheval Blanc is a 50-50 blend of Merlot and Cab Franc. So it's sort of like an irony of the movie to sort of underline that character's complexity and self-loathing and everything. But it was lost on the audiences and just devastated Merlot.
Yeah.
Anyway, I
No,
like
no,
that.
but yeah, it's a great point. Yeah.
Well, so the other one of the other I think really cool aspects of your vineyard is the people that you rely on. One of the main guys that you rely on, Rico, to take care of it and do the day to day, lives on the vineyard, right? He's got the highest house on the property. Is that
Exactly.
am
He
I
literally
getting
has the best view in the whole
right?
property, I believe, from his house. I'm a little jealous. Sometimes he has a nice deck that they built with an amazing view. So yeah, Ricardo's been with us. He's lived on the property for 20 years. So he's farmed that land, for decades. So he's absolutely instrumental in everything that happens there, from farming to the winemaking. So he does literally 90% of the labor, in the sense, he manages sometimes other guys in the vineyard as well when we do need extra help. But also in the cellar, he's kind of my right hand when we're doing rackings, during bottling. So he's involved in pretty much the whole process. Um,
Yeah. And I mean, we've already described it's a lot of hand work. I mean, there's, this is a hand tended large, I mean, 10 acres hand tended is no joke.
No joke,
Um,
yeah. So we do everything, So of course, like every vineyard, we do our pruning. So he prunes at least half the vine. So it's usually him and Octavio that do all the pruning. So it's two people doing 10 to 12 acres. So we'll start January 3rd this year, and we'll go on almost until bud break. So they're definitely, spending a lot of days out there. And then after that, we have to go through and pick up all the prunings because, yeah, we don't have a tractor to, we're not disking all our prunings into the ground. So we have to take all our prunings out, all by hand. All the compost, our fertilization programs mainly compost. So we put that out by hand. So this year we just finished putting out 24 tons of compost. Him and
oh,
Octavio did a
wow.
wonderful job. And the year before that, it was 25 or 24 tons of gypsum.
Wow.
So
Okay.
yeah.
I'm sorry. It sounded like a good segue to ask about why are you putting so much gypsum in your vineyard?
So yeah, I mean, I think it's a topic. I believe I brought it up when you're at the visiting us at the property, that we do have a fair amount of serpentine soils up at Alta Orsa, which makes it even more challenging because we didn't have enough challenges as it was. Uh,
So describe those soils for anybody who isn't familiar with what that means.
So yeah, serpentine soils, it's a particular soil type. Basically, it's a metamorphic rock. Rocks that were basically pushed up from sort of the seabed through the tectonic plates or the continental plates, kind of crashing, and they. But the basic issue, I guess, going back to it, is that the content, they have a really high content of magnesium. So it really throws everything out of balance. So, like most plants, they need a balance between calcium and magnesium for cation exchange to uptake, micronutrients and macronutrients.
Hmm.
And serpentine soils just have an inordinate amount of magnesium. So we cannot put enough gypsum out to balance out that magnesium. So our
Because
plants are always struggling
the
with that
gypsum is
issue.
the source of calcium, or it helps provide a
Exactly.
way. Okay, got it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so it helps alleviate or bring the ratio a little bit more into balance.
got it.
So yeah, we just can't add enough, gypsum. We did, like I mentioned, 24 tons, and that was, I'll probably have to do it. I didn't do it in all the blocks because we were doing about 5 tons per acre. So it's
Okay.
just in sort of the easier blocks that we could get to,
Wow.
because it
Wow.
is.
Got it.
We have to do it all without machinery.
Right.
So it's
Shoveling
all
it around with a wheelbarrow, I imagine.
exactly,
Wow.
exactly. And as you can imagine, with the topography, it makes it even more challenging
Yeah.
because it's not on a flat surface. So wheelbarrow, 100 pounds on a 30-degree slope, that's not always the best idea.
Wow. So how old are the vines that are the mature vines in the vineyard? They're
Yeah, most of them are a little bit over 30 years old. So
okay.
most of them were planted in the late 80s.
So it
I think the youngest are probably about 25, so 35 to 25 years old for the majority.
and do these poor soils, or I don't call them poor soils, do these challenging soils lead to decreased vine vigor or vine health? I mean, does that cause other issues down the line as the vines grow and mature, or do the vines sort of find, have you found that the older ones have just sort of found their own equilibrium over time and are doing just fine?
So I would describe them as poor soils. I think you're right, Adam. So one of the challenges with serpentine soils is that because they are so challenging for plant life, they haven't built up much organic matter over the years. So they can
Got
be
it. Yeah.
categorized as poor soils. So they're very rocky. They don't have a lot of clay. So just there's minimal organic matter, maybe 12 inches at most, and below that it's a lot of shale and sandstone as well, kind of mixed in with the serpentine. So it definitely has created issues over time where it creates, it's such a tough environment for the vines. So there is decreased vigor. We never really have to fight with overly vigorous vines, aside
Right.
from maybe end rows once in a while. But the challenges for us is always bringing vigor back into the vineyard. So that's always
Right.
what I'm thinking about. And
Right.
then also water, water retention on these very rocky, poor soils is very challenging. So one of the big things that I thought was so smart of the Topels was practicing what we now, call regenerative farming, in the sense of no tilling, adding compost, and starting this 30 years ago to really start building up the soil. So our land, partly because we can't fit a tractor, but also the way things were planted and the Topel's philosophy, it's never been tilled in the 30 years that the vineyard's been there. So
Right.
that has allowed us to build up some decent soils that are still challenging, and we have to continue those practices. But at least I think the organic matter are at acceptable levels now.
Oh wow. Yeah, that is fantastic. what else is being done? I mean, when you talk about the regenerative way that it's been farmed, other than the no-till and all the compost and things that you were doing, anything else in particular that you guys employ?
So, of course, cover cropping. I've been doing a lot of experiments with cover cropping to see kind of what works best. It does make it a
Yeah.
little bit challenging because depending on what we use, then it makes it really hard to mow. So, my big next step, I believe it might be bringing in livestock. So, I would love to bring in sheep because we also spend an enormous amount of time mowing our vineyard.
Yeah. And
As you can
again, with
imagine,
with difficulty, I imagine.
with difficulty because of slopes, because of it's just really labor intensive.
Yeah.
Before they used to just weed whack about 10 acres, so it literally took all summer long for three people to do it.
Wow.
So I've been able to make small improvements. I bring in a tracked called a flail mower, basically with a
Mm,
24 inch cutting radius to help us mow sort of the flatter blocks that we can get this little piece of machinery. It's it looks like a big lawnmower, but can also
sure. Yeah.
chip some of the canes. So making small improvements like that to really keep everything in the vineyard, try not to remove any kind of organic matter.
Yeah. I
But
mean, I can. Sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, no. So I guess that's not necessarily a regenerative practice. But just
Well, I
trying
mean,
to,
you're not.
yeah,
Yeah, it's all part of it. I think. I mean, you're creating you're mowing and creating a like a grass mulch or whatever, like a just a normal organic mulch from that, letting it
exactly.
lay. I can
But
definitely envision sheep there. I mean, it would be just the icing on the cake, honestly.
yeah, no, I've really wanted to do it. I started looking into it last year. So I contacted KOS, which they're out of Lake County, and they are doing some amazing work. Unfortunately, I think because of our location and the size of our vineyard, we're too small really for kind of their operation.
Uh,
And I did find someone else that was willing to do it, but the cost, unfortunately, it was cost prohibitive. It was around $1,200 an acre.
ooh,
And to do
well,
that every year, it didn't, you know.
maybe it's time to become a shepherd,
I
Martin.
think it is. After hearing your podcast, the one with Nathan from Topless Creek, I
Yeah,
really was inspired. So I am in contact with someone right now that may help us bring in a herd in house,
nice.
just because it might be the best solution.
Yeah,
I'm sure
yeah,
that's
that's
another set of challenges, but I think it would solve a big, issue for us, which is labor during the summer.
yeah, yeah, that's right. I mean, you'd only need one person who wouldn't have to work quite as hard. They'd just be sort of moving the sheep a little, every couple days.
Exactly. I mean, I think if Ricardo, instead of mowing, just spent time moving the sheep, it would be a lot more effective, and we wouldn't be burning so much fuel
Right.
mowing the
A
whole vineyard. So yeah, I think it
little
could
less
be
work.
a little less work for him and
Right,
us.
right. Yeah. That's nice. So, I mean, you know, given all of these things, what are some of I mean, I can say from my own experience that what I saw because of like the decreased vigor and the poor soils, the extreme drainage and lack of water retention, you end up with these really concentrated, tiny buried clusters, from what I remember.
Hmm.
And I mean, I definitely taste that in the wines. Can you talk a little bit about that and other some of the maybe it's a a negative of the site that actually turns into a positive in the wine.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that a lot of things we've mentioned, sound like negatives, like the spacing, but everything at the end of the day, I think of it as a positive. At first it seemed like quite a challenge, but then after farming the land, you really get to see the positives in all these things all these challenges, right? So, yeah, reduced vigor means we usually don't have to leaf. We have enough light penetration, and we're such a windy site. We don't really have a lot of kind of disease pressure in general. Concentration, we're never, I don't have to bleed any of my fermentations to get concentration because, like you mentioned, we have these tiny little berries. really tough, beautiful skin. With that has great color and tannin structure.
Yeah.
So, and if, yes, it's challenging because sometimes we get half a ton at most 2 tons per acre. So economically, it's not always fantastic or feasible, but from a wine quality, it is kind of an ideal site. So yeah.
Wow. Did you say half a ton to 2 tons is about your range?
Exactly. So I
Okay.
I think the most that I've seen is about 2.5 tons. But this
Okay.
year with the drought, we had about average of half a ton per acre in all our blocks.
Wow.
Yeah,
That is that is extreme.
it is extreme. It's not like I mentioned. It's farming. It's not economically feasible in years like
Right.
2021.
Yeah.
So there's definitely challenges in farming that land, but we're fortunate that we farm for quality. So it still makes some amazing wines, and it's good that we're not just growers because there's no way we could ever recoup the cost of farming as just
Yeah.
growers. We have to make it and sell it ourselves to sort of break even.
Yeah, no, I mean for real. Like I think it's good for people to understand those realities. Like I mean, I've seen some spreadsheets for wineries, for vineyards in Santa Barbara, and it doesn't pencil out into the black until they're at 3 tons an acre, and
Yeah,
so I imagine the math is pretty similar up there, and
exactly.
that's part selling, part selling wine, part selling grapes. So if you're the only way to make less than that work, I think, is what you're saying by doing it, selling, making the wine from that and selling the wine. And I think people need to understand that that's the cost that goes into a bottle when they're paying for it. Like otherwise,
Absolutely.
you guys just couldn't exist. This magical gem of a vineyard would just go to waste because like the economics wouldn't be there for it. It's yeah, a real
Exactly. No,
thing.
yeah, we have to sort of vertically integrate everything. From the vineyard management, we can't really outsource anything. We have to kind of bring everything in house because we have to really control costs from the vine until we sell it. But yeah, I think that that's a hugely important thing that people need to understand that farming, organically and in special sites, it's, a 30-40 dollar wine doesn't really, we're not making a killing. No one's making a ton of money here.
Right.
It's really just to cover cost of our labor
Yeah.
and production cost.
And so, what wines are you making? What do you have that people can try?
Yeah, so we're always proudest of our estate wine. So from our estate, we make basically a reserve Cabernet that usually comes from 2 blocks. So we have block 3 and block 1. So block 3 is right by the winery, and block 1 is close to the winery. Both are kind of some of the oldest blocks, but they're also have more of a southern and eastern exposure. So they have beautiful, get beautiful morning sun. They build a really great, kind of tannin quality and a lot of color and really plush kind of mid palate and great structure. So that's kind of our main production. Then we make the hillside cuvee, which comes from the northern facing blocks, kind of the steep blocks against that face Duncan Peak.
Hmm.
That's mainly Cabernet, and like I mentioned, also some of the Merlot goes into that blend. But those blocks are totally different, though. Even though they're Cabernet, stones throws away.
Yeah.
They build a totally different profile. And then the Syrah, which is probably honestly my favorite wine that we make, but we just have very very little bit. This vintage, I think we had about 30 gallons. So
Whoa.
yeah,
Wow.
the deer ate, like I mentioned, a big portion of it, and the turkey.
Um, I'm gonna get a little angry at those deer pretty soon here. That's some good Syrah too.
Yeah.
I love that Syrah. Um, yeah, those deer need to be taught a lesson. I'm telling you.
Exactly. Well, no, I think the deer fencing's going to work, and I think we are
Okay.
going to get a dog this year as well. So to
Uh,
hopefully
nice. Well, that
keep
would
them
help with the
away.
sheep. That would help with the
Exactly.
sheep.
I know it all starts to connect, right? You start
Right.
building this kind of ecosystem for it to work.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great word. I mean, I think that's the way. I mean, that's the way it appears. It doesn't. It your experience of going up that dirt road and then arriving at the gates. This old, it has this old, like, it feels like an old Italian villa. Honestly, I think the
Mhm.
architecture is that style. So, whoever built the buildings originally, and you have this stone gate and a stone and iron gate, and you sort of do feel like it feels like it's very integrated into that mountain, like it's built as part of
Yeah.
that ecosystem, and you see it everywhere. I'm joking about hurting the deer, but that's clearly their home.
It is.
But yeah, it's like home to so many things, which is I think really cool about it. And look, I know I sound like I'm totally promoting this from ulterior motives, but honestly, we don't really have much of that wine left to sell. We're pretty much sold out, so it's not going to benefit me to make you guys look good in any personal way. I just really think I'm as excited about it now as I was when I first visited and discovered it, and really think that it's unfortunate that you don't get the attention that I think you deserve. So I'm happy to sort of do what I can
Mm,
to highlight some of the special aspects of this place.
thank you.
It's yeah,
Yeah,
it's
no,
really
it's an honor to really be as kind of the stewards of the land now, this special property, and I'm really excited about the future. What it holds. We're gonna continue improving farming, and also I think on winemaking. We're making a fair amount of Cabernet now, and I hope to diversify our varietals. Of course, I need to focus on what we're doing now. There's, as you know, you can go in many directions. You can get excited very quickly with many things in the wine world. But I think
right.
focus in farming too.
Yeah, yeah,
So I think my goals in the next 2 years definitely, bringing hopefully some sheep into the vineyard, and bringing potentially some more, partner vineyards, because we do need to increase our production a little bit, to make it a little bit more sustainable of a winery business.
yeah. So you actually have the ability to pay yourself a salary, and
Exactly.
and everyone else that works there. It sounds like, and you guys aren't certified. It's not a certified organic vineyard or anything, biodynamic or anything, if I'm
Not
correct.
not yet. So yeah, so I would love to be certified, and I think that's another possibility for this year. And I think we briefly mentioned, talked about
Yeah, we talked about it. You're
the
doing everything.
certification. Yeah, so we're being, we farm completely organically. So, since I've come in, let's see, a fertilization program, just used, or actually organic compost from Cold Creek, which is a great operation here in Mendocino
Mm,
County. And I tried fish emulsion as well, which I
hmm.
loved. And I was really excited about until I found out that it can also clog your emitters,
Ah,
unless you flush it out. So I did use it. Was it last year?
so you were like fertigating it, kind of
Fertigating
thing, or
it because I was, I
yeah.
can, I wanted to fertigate, so I installed sort of an injection point in our irrigation system, which is, it's a whole different topic, irrigation, but
Right, right.
uh,
Oh God.
so yeah, I did it, and then I talked to a friend. He's like, "Oh yeah, I've heard that sometimes it can clog your irrigation, so you have to really flush it out after you use it." So of course, I go and I
Yeah.
opened the end of one of the lines, and yeah, it just kind of gets stuck there. So I was having to
Uh,
clear all my lines, and maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but it sounds a little risky. So kind of went back to just compost. So what has been done really on the property for the last 30 years, just bringing tons and tons of compost to continue building those soils. But so yeah, our fertilization program is basically completely organic. And then pesticides, the only thing that we really use. So they're all organic. So we use mainly sulfur dust,
hmm.
but this year, after hearing once again one of your podcasts with Steve Mathiasen, so I did start using stylet oil early in the season
Yeah.
for mildew, and that allowed us to reduce basically our sulfur use to about 3 dustings per year. So that's
Yeah.
all. That's all I did this year was an early stylet, 3 sulfur deaths, and then we tried some of the biologicals, sort of after that in the problem spots. So not the whole vineyard, but just targeting, where we know we have mildew issues in the
Got
past.
it. Yeah.
So yeah, we did a little bit of Sonata and
Regalia?
no Serenade.
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 Oh,
Yeah,
gotcha.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. We sounds like us here in South Central. We start with stylet, then move to sulfur for about 3 sprays, like you said, and then move to cinerate. Sort of finish on cinerate. So getting the sulfur out of the vineyard before as far from harvest as possible.
Exactly.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and you are sourcing from some other places for some of your other wines, but and that's you. How I mean, do you do that every year? You guys are currently
Yeah,
do,
so
yeah,
I did start sourcing from other vineyards partly because so we're inland Mendocino County, so fairly warm climate. It's best for Bordeaux varietals, and I've always loved making Pinot and Chardonnay. So we made those, at Crossburn and Paul Hobbs. Wanted to
yeah.
continue that tradition. I've always been really excited about making. I've always really enjoyed making Pinot, so we started sourcing from what I call a heritage vineyard. So, vineyards that have been farming their, farmers that have been in their land for a long time. So I partnered with Hafner Vineyard, so my in-laws, for Chardonnay.
Nice.
I know they're grape growing. I know, the vineyard very well.
Yeah.
It also helped me because I have a tiny little, half-ton press. So they assist me with pressing my whites,
Oh,
the
sweet.
Chardonnay.
Yeah.
So that makes it a lot easier for me.
Got it.
I've always really enjoyed the Chardonnay. Beautiful minerality out of this property. It's kind of along this old. It's along Sawsall Creek. It's a tributary of the Russian River. Very gravelly, loamy soil. So yeah, it's a great site for Chardonnay. And then for my Pinot Noir, I partnered with Susser Vineyard. So the Susser's been around in Sonoma County since the 1840s. And this
Oh, wow.
particular vineyard, I think it's 36-year-old planting of Pinot Noir, all 115. Which starting small, I couldn't really choose. I can't source 3 different clones of Pinot Noir, and I've always loved kind of the 115 as a standalone clone.
Yeah.
And through a mutual friend, it became available after a big winery kind of dropped all contracts in Sonoma County, and yeah, it became available. I was incredibly surprised to find this little gem. So I make a Pinot Noir and a rosé from there.
Nice. Yeah, I remember seeing that rosé and tasting it and loving
Yeah,
it.
it is an amazing rosé.
Well, great. So how do people find out and try this stuff? Find out more.
Yeah,
I know you guys have some presences out there in the world. What are they?
So our presence, so on our website, that's probably the best, orsawines.com, or you can always email me, martin@orsawines.com.
That's ORSA Wines.
Exactly. ORSA Wines. Or come visit us. So just give us a call, shoot me an email. I always love to, show people the property because it's truly hard to understand our wines without having been to the winery and to the vineyard. And I'm always happy to barrel taste, to walk through the vineyards. It's a real joy to share this special place with anyone and everyone that wants to come.
I love that. Well, thanks so much, Martin. This has been great. I love talking about this place, and I think you do a great job there. I really love what you guys are doing, and like I said, our wines are sold out almost, and for a reason. It's incredible. It's incredible stuff that's coming out of that little gem. So I hope the same for you guys as well. Hope selling out is your destiny.
I hope so too. That would be a great destiny. And by the
In
way,
the best sense. Yeah,
I love
not selling out like selling your soul.
No, not in that way. Selling out of the wine or about product.
Yes.